Welcome to the ZoomInfo Labs podcast. I'm Ben Salzman.
And I'm Millie Beetham. Today, we're thrilled to sit down with Godard Abel, co-founder and CEO of G2. As one of our most important partners, G2 has revolutionized how businesses discover and vet software solutions.
Godard brings decades of experience as a serial entrepreneur, having built and exited companies like Big Machines and Steelbrick.
We discuss his journey, his learnings from scaling SaaS businesses, and his visionary approach to transforming the way companies buy software. We also explore how AI and data are reshaping go-to-market strategies and the future of B2B sales. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the ZI Labs podcast. We have a very special guest, Godard Abel, who is the CEO and co-founder of G2. G2 is one of our most important partners. We're a big user, and we're just honored to have you here today. Maybe if you could, for the audience, describe a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story, and then we have so many questions for you.
Yeah, no, thanks. Great to be here with you, Ben and Millie. And my background, I've been a software entrepreneur now for 25 years. And so G2 is really the third company I'm building as CEO. The first company was Big Machines, which was a very early cloud CPQ configure price quote app, eventually bought by Oracle. But that was kind of a 12, 13-year struggle. And we built another one of those, Steelbrick, specifically for the Salesforce ecosystem, another CPQ, called it kind of a next-gen CPQ made simple, because the first one was too complicated. And that company was quickly acquired by Salesforce. So then I spent some time at Salesforce on kind of Mark Benioff's and leadership team. And then I came to G2, where we've really been on a mission to build the trusted place you go for software, help software buyers quickly discover, research the best apps to really make them more successful in their own business. And so that's what we're still focused on, building at G2 today.
I loved when I first looked at your LinkedIn and saw that you were like, hey, this market, let me exit to Oracle, and let's just do that again and exit to Salesforce. Describe what that thinking was like when you started Steelbrick the second time around.
I think like most entrepreneurs, we spent 12, 13 years building big machines, and as you look back, you're like, oh, I wish I'd done some things differently, and especially with software architecture. And I think one of the things we realized with big machines, we started building it all the way in 2000, and it was obviously a very different world because I remember there was actually no cloud yet. So we had to do things like buy Sun servers, Oracle databases, set up our own hosting, colo. Everything was really hard. And frankly, it was also the first time we built a CPQ app, so we made a lot of architectural mistakes. And so that was really inspiration for Steelbrick. Is like, oh, wow, we get to do it all over again, with a fresh start, fresh architecture. And one of the things we realized with big machines, we became a close partner to many CRM systems, including Salesforce. And we also partnered with Oracle, their traditional Siebel product, that became Oracle CRM. That's who Oracle wound up acquiring us, but we just thought, wow, there's a huge vacuum now in the Salesforce ecosystem. And as partners to both, we realized I was growing the fastest. And so we said for Steelbrick, let's really architect it with Salesforce sales users in mind. And so we created it more as what you call a native application. And so it's very seamless for a Salesforce user. And so we also call it CPQ made simple, because it's just much easier for sales reps to use that CPQ. Like they wouldn't feel like they weren't using Salesforce at all. And so it's easier for the reps to generate their quotes, update their opportunity pipelines. And then also on the back end, we also made it architecturally much better. So people that had to maintain all the pricing rules, the quoting logic, could also do it much more easily and just as easy as administering Salesforce. And that was really the idea. And it did work very well. And I think we were kind of surprised. I mean, the exit, I think most entrepreneurs, you never really have the exit in mind. I think, you're just looking to build the best business. And this is actually a quote from John Samorjai. He's the EVP of Corporate Development at Salesforce, but he said the best company is a bought, not sold. And I kind of believe that, right? It's an entrepreneur. I think if you're building with an exit in mind, it's probably the wrong way to build it. But I think usually if you build a good company, someday a good exit will come.
So were you entrepreneurial even before you went to school? It sounds like the bug tips over at Stanford, but that happens to many. Much earlier, when you're a child, were you tinkering? Were you building from the ground up? Was this always your personality?
I do think I got it from my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur in a very different industry, but he was in up manufacturing.
Okay.
And he had a small, pump company my grandfather had started, way back after World War II in Germany. Wow. And but it's also how I wound up in the United States. I was born in Germany. But then my father, as an entrepreneur, said he wanted to go conquer the U.S. market. And his company was small. He had only 50 employees. they just decided to pick up our whole family, moved us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so he could start a U.S. subsidiary for his pump company.
Well, I mean, that kind of environment, yes.
Yeah,
Great entrepreneur.
so always, even on weekends, I'd go in this company with him, and I think that inspired me. Then I do remember in high school, I started a company called Ultimate Car Care with my best friend at the time, Joe Rosito, and we were just doing car washing, car detailing.
It's incredible.
And actually, one of the funny stories I remember, to market that business, we decided, we just printed some flyers, took like our prom picture, his dad had a Corvette, and took a picture and suits from the Corvette. And we're like, wow, we'll make your car as shiny as this red Corvette. But then our marketing plan was we just printed those flyers, and then we made photocopies. And then we actually went to stuff mailboxes kind of in our community ourselves. And actually we learned we got in trouble from the U.S. Postal Service. I guess you're actually not allowed to.
Oh, right.
I was going to say that.
Like, not allowed to stuff mailboxes. It's actually a property of the U.S. government.
Right. Federal offense, probably.
Yeah, luckily it was just a warning letter. We got away with it. And, we got enough customers to wash some cars and make some money on weekends.
That's fantastic. Well, we have so many questions about G2, which we'll get to in a second. But just one thing I want to ask more about those early years. Did you have a set of sort of management principles or a way of thinking about entrepreneurship going in, or has that really evolved over the year? You didn't even think of it that way at the time.
My first company, Big Machines, I would say no. And I think I was like 28 years old, and fresh out of business school. It was just more like adrenaline. And I would say I saw these internet entrepreneurs killing it, and I just said, hey, I just want to be like one of them. We just kind of started running, but we weren't very conscious about the culture at all. I mean, I went and recruited a couple of friends who had my keyed up, started with me. Then I had another startup in the Valley, and recruited a couple more friends. And it was just a bunch of us, kind of late 20s, all adrenaline. And we're just like, let's just build something. But it was very, I would say, unthoughtful. And in hindsight, we were also pretty clueless. Just really had no idea how to build a company.
Yeah.
I feel like, of course, we want to talk about go-to-market strategy. I think, there's so much, around intelligence and market trends that you can share based on, what you're seeing. I think, where I will start is around, what are your core principles today around go-to-market strategy, and maybe how have they shifted meaningfully sort of over the years in terms of what you've learned along the way?
Yeah. And I think go-to-market strategy, at the end of the day, I do think it's about personalizing, really understanding your prospect, your customer, really understanding their needs, and then, shaping your solution and telling the story of your solution in a way that it does meet their needs and their requirements and how you can make their business better. And I think I learned that kind of the hard way at Big Machines, because the first few years, frankly, we had very little success selling, and we almost went out of business. And so it was very painful and scary. And then we just realized, wow, we really have to go deeper with our customers. And we developed this method we called a BOA, it was a breakthrough opportunity assessment. And it was like a 2-day workshop, because those days the internet and the cloud were very early. This was like early 2000s. Most of our customers were very scared. They're very scared to do anything online. And so we really had to develop a very consultative selling process to help show them how the current process was broken. And by going to an online quoting and ordering process, they could actually be much better, much more efficient. So we kind of learned to be very much understand our customers' pains, make sure they understood them, and then really map our solution to that. And so I think that's what we learned at Big Machines. And I think today it's a lot easier to do those, there's many more digital tools. And also, then what I had to learn as an entrepreneur, how do you scale that? Because I was like early Big Machines deal was like one day deal at a time. But now at G2, we have like 30 customers. And, we have a couple hundred people in our revenue organization. And so now what we're learning is, how do we do that at scale? How do we still understand the customer's needs, really offer a personalized solution, but then you'll be able to do that digitally and be able to do it at scale?
Yeah. You just mentioned that there was this big shift in technology, and therefore you had to think differently about your go-to-market strategy, right? The internet, cloud, et cetera. Okay, we're going to do these sort of consultative workshops. Are you seeing something similar today, given that we're at another sort of pivot point in technology and technological innovation like Gen AI?
Yes. And I do think, Gen AI is a whole other reinvention of the internet. And I think one of the biggest changes is also going to be how do buyers discover products. And I think the last 20 years, it's been Google search. And I think that's how a lot of discovery has started. And, one of our biggest G2 customers is IBM. And I know that EPSL said even 98% of enterprise buyers will start with the Google search. But I think now quickly, like I just saw a statistic that year over year, Google search trends are down about 11% organically. But LLM AI discovery and search is up at least 35%. So I think that's the next big shift we're seeing now, where the buyers are going to start an open AI, then start an AI engine versus starting with a Google search. And but I think all of this also opens up new opportunities for sellers, because I think buyers can make sense of a lot more data. And also as sellers, we have a lot more data that allows us to understand our prospects and to personalize our offers.
I know.
And really make it easier for the buyer to buy. And I do think in this digital world, I think that's going to be the next generation of go-to-market, is how do we make it really easy for buyers that are probably starting an AI? How do we really create a personalized digital experience for them and make it really easy for them to discover and buy, with a little bit of nudging and assistance from our teams.
Yeah. I mean, how are you doing that today within G2, like using your own intelligence for that to drive sort of that evolution and go-to-market strategy internally?
Yeah, well, one thing we've launched at G2 is our G2 AI Monty.
I have used it. It is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what Monty does is it can answer a lot more of the buyer's questions, with that before they actually get connected to a human sales rep. Mm-hmm. But Monty can answer kind of the basics about, G2, the profile, how do you manage it, what's the value of our tech data, so the prospect can get much smarter on their own.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Monty will hand off and say, hey, do you want a demo? Do you want more consultation from one of our G2 experts? But then by the time they get to that conversation, they're already much more up to speed and much more qualified. And I think that's just one example of, how we're using AI to walk the buyer further down the funnel more efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, are you already seeing the efficiencies? Like, I feel like we've asked a few sort of our guests, you're starting to implement these tools or build them yourself. Are you seeing the efficiencies yet, or are you still sort of waiting?
I think overall our AE productivity is up about 30% year.
Wow, you're right. Amazing. So it's already happening.
Yes. And I think we're all also under pressure now, most of us, right? I think also investors are expecting tech companies to be more efficient.
Yeah.
So we all have to drive more productivity, but good news is we're already seeing tremendous productivity gains. Oh. And I think it's hard to attribute to any one tool, but I think as we're also a ZoomInfo customer. Mm-hmm. And so we're also using tools like Copilot. And we were just chatting about this before, but I do a lot of executive meetings. I love meeting our customers. Mm-hmm. And then, what I've done traditionally, I have a Google template that my assistant, Nikki, will send to the AE and say, hey, please fill in this key information so that Godard is prepared to meet your customer. But now I think we're finding with Copilot, it can auto-generate that summary and frankly pull in a lot more information. Because the beauty of AI and Copilot and ZoomInfo, right, you can look at all our emails, all our calls, synthesize all the information in real time. And oftentimes I think the AI-generated summary is better than an EA summary.
Good. Yeah.
And so that's really exciting. And I think that's just one example how obviously that can save our sales rep, let's say, an hour, in terms of manually filling out that briefing. And it also improves the quality where I'm actually better prepared for the meeting and we have a higher chance of, converting that prospect into a customer.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just one great example of how you take one stick to the sales process, both make it more efficient and you make it higher quality. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's just so many opportunities now for all of us to improve our go-to-market.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's really just fascinating how you just compress all the badness of like the prep and the questions and pulling all the information together. Just gets the good part of like strategy. What are we going to do? How are we going to just work together? It's been a breakthrough for everyone. Talk a little bit about, with AI in mind, what are your customers' needs and expectations? What are they asking for, let's say 1-3 years out, that you're willing to share on things you're thinking about building in the future?
And I think customers' expectations are also going up.
Mm-hmm.
At G2, we had 3,600 B2B software company as customers, and they're all under the same pressure we are. They all have to be more efficient. They all have to hit Rule of 40. Mm-hmm. And so I think the bar is going up. Mm-hmm. And probably in general right now, sales and martechs are shrinking. Whereas in 2021 in the Zerk environment, everyone was just buying more tools and it was great.
Yep.
But I think now people are forced to have fewer tools, get more value from them. And so at G2, we also have that same bar. But I think what we're also seeing is our customers, they do want to be more efficient. And one of the best ways to do that in go-to-market is to be more targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love this I think saying from your founder, CEO Henry Schuck, he says you have to target the right buyer at the right time with the right message. And I think the exciting thing about AI, ZoomInfo, G2 data allows you to do that. Because probably our best ROI product we offer at G2 to marketers is our buyer intent data. And that answers that question, is it the right time to reach out to this prospect? And I think we were also talking about this earlier. I think that's where consumer marketing is so great. And sometimes it's so great, it's even creepy. But I know when I go to Instagram, like we lived up here in Boulder, nearby. My daughter loves to ski. And now, when I go to Instagram, I'll be getting like the pre-season sale.
Right.
And it just happens to be my daughter's favorite brand, her favorite color, her size.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did you know my wife and I were talking about getting ready for the season? And, but it's wonderful, because like so many consumers, I'll click on that Insta ad and I'll buy because it's, they're targeting with the right message.
Right.
It's perfect.
It's personalized, it's the right time. And I think B2B traditionally has lacked that.
Yes.
We've all done a lot more spray and pray. We use this technology. The first wave was probably like, hey, just do more outbound, right? Like go reach out to every contact, every company that might fit your ICP, but we're not very targeted.
Yeah.
We're not reaching out at the right time. The message isn't personalized enough. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity our customers are seeing, by using a combination of our intent data to target people at the right time when they know they're shopping for their type of software, plus a platform like ZoomInfo, your marketing OS, your sales OS, so you can orchestrate that. So you're getting also to the right context, based on the data. And you can take all that context to craft the right message, because you can also, with AI and with Copilot, you need to look at the news, where that might have the last earnings call, where this challenges their CRO, CMO are facing. And you can, with AI, have a great draft message that incorporates all of that, right? Dials into their priorities, reaching out to them at the right time. And so I think it's going to be a really exciting era where I do think we can all get much more targeted and, make B2B marketing more like B2C.
Agreed. I'm like, hey, track me, send me more relevant stuff, please. Like,
yes,
the core. To that point, when we talked about this in the warm-up, one of the things that leads to sort of right targeting, segmentation, content pivots, et cetera, is stacking different types of data, stacking different signals on top of each other, which has become a lot easier with AI to sort of make sense of it all, right? One of the things that we get pulled into a lot is like, okay, how do we combine our user data and marketing funnel data with G2 data and ZoomInfo data? We sort of like are working with the term here. We don't have to come up with the term. We often will think of it as like multi-party data or whatever. Maybe just talk a little bit about how you think about how companies should approach combining different data sets and where you think that goes over time.
Yeah, and we are fans of multi-party data, if you will, because I think to create that personalized message, the perfect outreach for your prospects, I do think more high-quality data is always better. And so obviously, I think every company should be looking at first-party data. They're looking at like what's the digital engagement of their prospects with their own content. I think every company has it on their website, but then I think enhancing it with second-party data, like G2 buyer intent. I know ZoomInfo also has buyer intent data where you can see what topics are executives at this company engaging with right now. And using all of that data, plus all the technographic data you have, the firmographic data, but mashing up all those data sets, I think allows you to really score the prospect's level of intent.
Yes.
And also allows you to understand, based on the industry, the company side, what challenges they're likely facing to really craft that perfect message. And so I think in AI, I think just makes it easier to synthesize all of that data. But I do think it's hard to do. And so I do think most companies, they need an orchestration platform. And I know you offer that at ZoomInfo, with your marketing OS combined with your sales OS and you have your ops OS, because combining multiple data sets, cleansing them, making sense of them, that can be challenging. And the good news is most companies don't have to invent this on their own.
Right.
They can buy a platform like ZoomInfo, take their first-party data, take second-party data like G2 and make sense of it all. And I think we're doing it together now for hundreds, soon thousands of companies. And I think the state of the art is advancing quickly. And so I do think it's easier and easier for marketers to take advantage of this data. But honestly, I also think if you're not using the data and you're not using the multi-party data, I think you're kind of at risk of falling way behind, right? Because if you stay with the traditional kind of spray and pray, very inefficient, you're probably not going to succeed in the future.
related, I feel like maybe at its inception, G2's always been an intelligence company, but I would say to the consumer, it was more a place to go to collect that intelligence, not thinking about it as, think about it as a consumer, information, intelligence, like place to go. But I feel like on the other side, or I never saw it as I was buying as something that then you could monetize. Like I never saw you all as a data company for some reason. I saw it as intelligence for me as a technology buyer, but I never saw you all as a data company. Was it always the case that you all knew that you were an intelligence, a data company at its core, and you sort of had this essentially community on top that was helping each other to review and provide input, et cetera? Or how did that sort of happen over time? Has the perspective changed on sort of where your priority has been as a business, sort of shifted back and forth, or have there always been these sort of two parallel tracks?
No, I'd say it's definitely shifted.
Okay.
And I think when we started the company, we didn't know we were going to be kind of a data market intelligence company. And I think, as you said, we always wanted to be a buyer intelligence company. And when we first started, we called it Yelp for software. And the idea was really simple, but just
it's interesting, yeah.
and we thought it was missing, because we've been building enterprise software companies for a long time already. But that same insight you get, now when you're visiting Denver, like you might not know where to go out to dinner or which bar to go to. And obviously, as consumers, you've gotten very used to it, right? You just go to Yelp, and if it's kind of 4.5 star and got hundreds of reviews, it'll be pretty good.
100%.
You can hear from the other diners, you can see pictures of their food, and we just thought, wow, that was really missing for software. And especially, we were relying on only traditional analysts, like let's say Gartner. And what was frustrating for us as entrepreneurs, our first company, I remember we didn't get in the Gartner report for 9 years. And then we didn't become a leader for 12 years. And honestly, that was frustrating for us as entrepreneurs. But it was also bad for our customers. Because at big machines, eventually we did sign up huge customers, huge manufacturers like GE Energy, made huge turbines. And I remember they finally found us, became a customer, but they said, wow, we wish we'd found you 3 years ago. We've been trying to develop the software in-house. So we just thought there was a huge discovery problem as well. And then we contrasted that to consumer lives, where there was Yelp. Obviously, Amazon invented online reviews. And we're like, it's so easy to shop at consumers. And having peer reviews is so essential. Because I know as a consumer, I don't buy anything online if it has 0 reviews. And we just said, wow, this has to come to our industry.
Yeah.
But so it was all about the software buyer and giving them free insights. That's the other thing we didn't like about the analyst file, is very exclusive. You have to buy like $100,000 a year subscription just to have access to analysts, access to research. And we also saw software being democratized. And I think it's true today, right? Even small businesses have tons of technology. Obviously, also large companies have a bigger tech stack than ever. And we just wanted all the buyers, to be able to get that intelligence to find the best software.
Yeah. If someone's just starting and they haven't gone down the path with, G2 or second-party data broadly, how do you recommend they get started?
Well, I do think it, probably is an overall, and a lot of people would call it an account-based strategy, but identifying what is your ICP, what's your ideal customer profile, like who are you really targeting? And then I think that's kind of step one, right? What's your strategy? And probably the best place to look is the customers you're already signing up, your most successful customers. What are their demographics? What are their technographics? And I think once you understand what is your target market, then I think you can start to then buy data to obviously, one, identify those companies at scale. Now, ZoomInfo, you have data on that, right? You can find, hey, who are all the companies in the world that are like my most successful customers? Yeah. Because obviously you want to add those to your target list. But then I think the second piece you can get with second-party intent data like G2 is, hey, when are they in market? That's how software companies use us, because in software it has many niches. Like there's hotel chain hospitality software, for example. And we do have a category for that, right? And obviously, if you're selling hotel automation software, you only want to target that buyer when they're in the market. And they're probably not in the market most years.
Yep.
But when they are, it's a perfect time to do outreach. And so I think, but step one, I'd understand your target accounts, understand your ICP, identify those at scale. And then I think the next step is, once you've done that, now use second-party intent data to make sure when they're in market, you never miss a deal.
It's well said.
So we talked a lot about the signal-based selling. I feel like you said, it's like starting an account-based, but it's really about understanding when these companies are in market and following that. I feel like at ZoomInfo, we're talking a lot about signal-based selling or signal-based go-to-market. Like, where is that going? Where is this a revolution? Is this something that everybody is going to sort of take in and use as a strategy? Do you believe that? Or are you leading out on that? Maybe what's the next frontier as you see it?
I do believe signal-based selling is going to be the way to go. And I think it's what we talked about earlier. It's, what B2C has been doing for years, right? Somehow they follow all our digital signals. They know when we're in the market, what we want to buy. And so I think signal-based selling can bring that to B2B, where we will be reaching out, when our buyers are actually interested. And it's also, I think, a kind of a movement HubSpot started also with inbound. You know what I mean? Like, put out the content that will educate your buyers. And then based on their digital engagement, you can identify when is the right time, right? When are you getting that signal that right now is a perfect time to do outreach to them? So I think signal-based is going to be the future. And honestly, I was thinking it's one of those things that we don't do, because you're going to be missing your ideal customers when they're shopping. And I think that's like the worst nightmare for any entrepreneur. This company that fits my ICP, they're perfect, they're shopping for my type of solution, but I'm not in the deal. And I think with signal-based outreach, targeting, I think every seller can avoid that nightmare.
So long as they have access to all the data to be able to see.
You do have to get all the signals.
The access.
And I do think AI is going to take that to another level. I think people are also saying data is the new oil. And also all these AI engines are fueled by data. And so I think also that data is going to be tapped into AI. And I think with AI, we can also make more sense of these signals. I think just like you're doing with Copilot, because AI can synthesize all the data, all the signals, and then, can come up both with the perfect message, the perfect scoring. And so I think all these systems are only going to get better at making sense of the signals, making sense of the data to really make it efficient for go-to-market teams.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on, one of the themes for this season is around community. Right. When you first started, it was actually called G2 Crowd, which is sort of right in the name. That is sort of like a community source, and providing insights for the community. Talk to us about how you think about community for G2, and is it part and parcel with the data collection, et cetera, or do you think of like your own user community as sort of separate from the way that you think about, how you are sourcing data and such?
I think they're very integrated. And you're right, we did call it G2 Crowd at the beginning, because we really wanted software reviews, insights from the crowd of users. And there was also an interesting book by Gene Cerliecki called The Wisdom of the Crowd. And really, he'd study, sites like Wikipedia, which is a great example of that. I remember I'm old enough, like I grew up in the 80s, when I was going to high school, but we still had Encyclopedia Britannica. And there were these beautiful books curated by experts where you could get insights on any topic. Obviously, it was before the internet, right? But then once Wikipedia came along, and there was a crowd of millions of passionate people around the world that were updating, really all the world's information in real time. Very quickly, Wikipedia became much better than Encyclopedia Britannica because it was real time and crowdsourced. And that was the idea behind G2, rather than just having one expert, like an analyst. And obviously, they do good work, they do good research, but it's one human. Whereas if you have a crowd of experts, users, a community of software experts sharing in real time, we always thought that would give you actually much better insights. And I do believe, though, having an active community, and at G2 we're still working on, we call an icon program, where we actually recognize our best reviewers, the members of the G2 community that are sharing the best software insights to help all their peers. We recognize them as icons, and obviously we really try to encourage them to keep sharing, because we think community, peer-based reviews, advice is really what the buyer is going to value. And then I think a second order effect of that allows us to get all the data, because obviously the community is contributing the reviews, the insights on the software, but that's also what brings the buyers and allows us to capture those signals. Because if we have the best community-driven insights on G2, all the software buyers in the world will come, and many of them will sign up, they will use our AI Monty. And so as they do that, we get all these signals about what's the buyer side of the community interested in buying right now. And that allows us, to then help the vendors do the signal-based outreach. And ultimately, I think that's better for everyone. Because in some ways, I also want G2 to be a marketplace and the ultimate matchmaking site. And in some ways, maybe like a dating site, where, everyone falls in love on the first demo. instead of the first date. But if we can perfectly match the buyer and the seller at the right time, then they will just have one happy demo. They will buy and they'll have the perfect solution, right? So that's kind of the dream that we're building towards.
Around that, you must have incredible, the market intelligence piece, right? Being able to look across all of the reviews and aggregate them sort of in the background and look at some of these trends around new categories, right? In places where people are finding success with certain types of software or less success with certain types of software. Are there any were there ever any aha moments out of those trends that you sort of didn't see coming and then exploded and really changed the trajectory of how we buy software?
Well, I do remember, and in hindsight maybe it's more obvious, but I remember when COVID first happened, in March 2020, and it was a very scary time for the world, health crisis. But I remember and we saw a huge surge in video conferencing traffic, for example.
Yeah.
I think it was up 500%.
Yeah.
Over 1 week. It was all
March 11th, 2020.
Yeah, right that week, because obviously, and most of us in tech, we already had Zoom or WebEx, we had some online meeting solution, but most businesses didn't. So we kind of saw in that crisis how critical also a resource like G2 became, because all of a sudden everyone needed digital tools for meetings, and we just saw many categories explode. As digital adoption really accelerated when, with the onset of COVID.
Other than Monty, what's next in terms of sort of AI at G2?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Monty, we started out with the buyer version of Monty that was very much focused on helping a software buyer. We continue to develop that. And I think the big breakthrough there is previously you'd have to know what category you're shopping for. And a lot of times that's confusing because those of us in the software industry, we create all these categories. Like in account-based marketing, there's 6 categories. There's account-based orchestration, account-based execution. And if you're deep in MarTech, you'll know what that means. But the average marketer and marketing leader, they're like, hey, I just want to improve my demand gen efficiency. How do I do that? And so that's, I think, where Monty is really an unlock. We do have 2,300 categories of software. But now the beauty with AI, you no longer have to know which category to shop in. You can just describe your business problems and Monty will advise you. But now we've also created this version of Monty for sellers, where, it can be, Monty can also be your SDR on their G2 profile, but sometimes even your AE. And so it's exciting. Monty is actually starting to close deals.
Wow.
And so we do believe that now with AI assistance, G2 can become much more of an active marketplace. And so we're also piloting with AWS. We're going to have a checkout with AWS button, because also more and more software vendors are listing their products on the AWS marketplace. But it'll be a way for us to offer checkout. And so we do see more and more software transactions in the future with the AI assistant guiding the buyer to the right product. But now we also see self-service checkout happening more and more. And so I think that's a future trend in software and on G2.
Yeah.
I think buyers are going to go further and further down the funnel. I think many more will actually self-service and even buy, apps that in the past they would have had to, have many sales conversations.
Maybe you did six figures, $500,000. That's probably not happening at all today, right?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I think it's still more starter editions trials, but I do think over time, and we've also seen this in consumer. I also remember back in the day, when eBay launched eBay Motors.
Right.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, nobody's going to buy a car signed through eBay. And now I think it's the biggest, the secondhand automobile seller in the world is eBay Motors. And, a lot of cars, those can be $50,000, $100,000 purchases.
Yeah.
And so I do think in business software, right, even, $50,000, $100,000 ARR deals, I do think, more and more self-serve is going to start happening.
Yeah, and to your point, Teslas are easier to buy online than they are in person. Sure. Tuck in they do all the insurance and all the things for you. I think we're probably going to move towards a world where you actually might prefer the experience of an AI only as opposed to a human only. It was scary for all the sales reps out there, but I think that's correct.
And I do think in the large enterprise deals, I think that's for AEs. I think they also have a lot of value by helping align to the customer's priorities. And as large enterprise, it's hard to build consensus.
Yeah.
And we all have this enterprise deals where you have a champion, you have a sponsor, they're excited, they want to buy it, but then they have to align at other departments. And so I do think that's where the AEs are going to be focused. You know, it's creating that alignment with their customers, the customer priorities. And I think on the really complex enterprise deals, yeah, I don't know if AI ever gets there.
Yeah.
But I think all the transactional, you know, I think we'll move more and more online to self-serve.
Yeah. It's really interesting. One of my favorite podcast episodes ever is the very first episode of Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. And he talks about how the way to build an incredible business, and this few years ago, was to build a platform or build a marketplace. And I think what's really interesting about your story is to go from big machines to Steelbrick and then pivot so beautifully into a marketplace, a platform, a B2C come B2B company has just set you all up for success in the future. It feels like you knew the future was coming, just like you did the 2 times before. Like, was it intentional? Like, where are you coming up with these ideas, Godard? It's incredible to see like the potential for that again to happen, to be just right in the right place with the right idea at the right time.
And I do think we were scratching our own itch, you know, because our first 2 companies, Big Machine and Steelbrick, I was always a software seller and frankly traveling around the world, you know, trying to close deals. And also it was just so hard to get that third-party validations from the Gartners of the world. You know, so it was really to solve our own pain. And we saw our customers with the pain of software discovery. You know, they didn't know what apps were out there. They didn't know whom they could trust to find the right software. And so I think it was all about, you know, kind of solving our own pain. And I do think that's where the best entrepreneurial ideas come from. You know, is when you're trying to solve a problem for yourself. And, you know, having been, you know, kind of suffering, if you will, in software go-to-market and distribution for 15 plus years, we just said, well, it's got to be a better way, and a better way to serve buyers, and a better, more targeted way for sellers to reach their customers at the right time.
If you play it out 5 or 10 years, are you going to keep starting companies until you become an old man, or what's your, I guess, longer term thinking?
Well, I do hope to more follow your founder, Henry Schuck, and, you know, one day ring the bell. And I've had, you know, 2 good exits, but I've never gotten to public company scale. And so I think that's the current game for G2. And we certainly have, you know, some more years of work to get there. So I think I'm very focused on that. And then honestly, I think this is probably my last company where I'm the co-founder CEO. And what I am starting to do kind of as a hobby is, you know, angel invest. And I'm on a few boards now with what I call entrepreneurial family. And so I think probably my next chapter post G2 will be, you know, helping the next generation of entrepreneurs realize their own dreams and build their own companies.
So this is our traditional final question.
Okay.
We always ask people, who is the smartest person you know, and what did you learn or take away from them?
The smartest person I know is Mark Benioff, the co-founder and CEO of Salesforce. And I got to know him very well when he acquired our last company, Steelbrick. And I think what I admired about Mark is just his ability to anticipate the next technology wave. And obviously way back in 1999, when he started Salesforce, he saw that software was going to move to the cloud, move to the internet, and he really led that revolution. And I remember around 2010, he became all about the social enterprise. And he saw the incredible rise of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and how that was also been influenced B2B. And I think now he's also all in on Einstein and AI. And so I think his ability to always, you know, pivot his company, ride and lead the next wave of technology is very inspiring to me.
Yeah, and to your credit, I still hear it called Steelbrick when people talk about that product at Salesforce. I think it's a great answer, and frankly, you know, it's a dream guest of ours. Maybe season 4.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Godard, thank you so much for spending time with us and coming on the ZI Labs podcast. Truly inspired. I remember the first time I went to your LinkedIn, I just kept scrolling like, whoa, this might be like one of the best sort of like entrepreneur software backgrounds around. So to have you on the ZI Labs podcast, we're truly honored. And we're glad to do this live here in your hometown here in Denver.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great to be with you, Ben and Billy. Thank you for hosting me. Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the ZoomInfo Labs podcast.
With new episodes dropping every Monday and Thursday, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me and Ben on LinkedIn and visit zoominfo.com/labs to get in touch.